New playlist, Artist Rewind, your ultimate intimate conversation with your favorite artist. Also, please join us in Patreon, where we have an all access VIP backstage pass where you'll get more of this episode, not just that much of it, all in there. And also, the first of the month, we have the Ultimate Vinyl Showdown. That's right, where we're giving away vinyl records to you. So if you join and you have some vinyl records you want to share on the show and win some, well, some of these can be yours. Some Chet Baker, some Beach Boys, but you got to be in it to win it. Links are in descriptions below. Tonight, we have legendary rock and roll photographer. You might have seen a couple of his pictures. Led Zeppelin in front of an airplane. John Lennon with the New York City t-shirt on and also in front of the Statue of Liberty. Sex Pistol, the Ramones. Well, Bob Gruen, he has a new book out right here, right place, right time, The Life of a Rock and Roll Photographer. We're going to ask him some questions. What is the life of a rock and roll photographer, and what is it like to be the man behind the lens of these images that are legendary? Bam! Well, thanks for being here, Bob. Wonderful having you here. You have a new book, and I'll pop it up here for everybody to see right here. Right place, right time, The Life of a Rock and Roll Photographer, Bob Gruen. Your storytelling captures the same thing that your images capture, which is the essence of New York, what was going on in the moment. You captured this moment, and it's a crazy photo, and it's one of my favorites of Tina Turner right here. Look at that. It's not the whole picture, but look at the imaging on this.
Yeah. It's five images of Tina. That was actually one photograph. It's not photoshopped or overlaid or anything. I was taking pictures of Tina at a small club, actually a club called the Honka Monka Room, if you can believe. I can't make that kind of name up, you know. But towards the end of Tina's set, as she dances off the stage, they have a strobe light flashing. So you just see jerky images of her dancing in the strobe light. And I only had about 3 or 4 frames left, and I could use up the film. So I thought, what would happen if I opened the camera for a second, and maybe I get a couple of those frames in one picture? And I took about 4 pictures like that. The other 3 are basically useless. There's an image all over the place. But this one came out so perfectly with all the faces just aligned. And it's interesting because since I took this picture, other people have asked me if I could take a picture of them like this. And I always tell them, I'll do it. I'll do what I did if you'll do what Tina did. So needless to say, we've never taken the same picture of anybody else, you know.
That's another right time, right place, in the right moment, and you snapped it. Just like the time of the book.
You know, it's just teaching people to try something. Like, I had no idea how it would come out. I had no idea, since she was flashing in the lights. I didn't know where to focus. I didn't know when to take the picture. And I just gave it a couple of tries. And one of them is probably one of my best pictures ever.
It is one of the best. But what a person like her to snap, because she's so busy on stage and shaking and moving, and how you caught that.
It's hard. Well, it's hard to take a bad picture of Tina because she's just so exciting. But to take one like that captures 5 images that really, because they don't really capture all the energy and excitement of Tina in one picture. So that one really captures a lot. And the lucky break was that we'd gone, a friend of ours had convinced us to see Ike and Tina because she was a fan, and she took us to a concert, and that's the first time I saw her. The second time I brought my camera, and then a couple of days later we were going to another Ike and Tina. They played a few shows around New York. They were here for about a week. And so a couple of days later I went to see them in New Jersey, and I brought the pictures to show my friend. But as we were coming out of the theater, my friend saw Ike Turner going from one dressing room to another. They were using trailers outside the theater as dressing rooms. And she kind of pushed me in front of Ike and said, show Ike the pictures. And he stopped and he turned and he said, what pictures? He's got a very deep voice. He goes, what pictures? And I said, well, I took these pictures the other night. And he started looking. He said, I had a feeling somebody was taking pictures at the right time. He said, oh, these pictures are really good. You got to come in. I got to show these to Tina. And all of a sudden I was standing next to Tina Turner. I was completely blown away. I had no idea that I would ever meet them. I had not brought the pictures to show them. I brought them to show my friend. And all of a sudden, Tina's telling me she likes the pictures. And then Ike said, well, come meet me in New York on Monday, and I'll take it to the record company. And he introduced me to a publicist at United Artists. And he took me to a party of a designer. And I met Jane Friedman, who became Patti Smith's manager. At the time, she was booking a club called Hurrah, where she was bringing a lot of English acts, like the Kinks played there, and the Hollies, and a lot of English acts were playing at Hurrah. So I got to meet Jane. I'm still friends with her today. She runs a really nice art gallery here in New York called Howell Gallery. And I also met Billy Smith, who was a freelance publicist working for Alice Cooper, and he brought me into the Alice Cooper management group. And I did a lot of work for Alice. We're still friends today. And so, like I say, each time I went somewhere, I would meet more people and things just started rolling. It was Billy Smith, actually, who took me to MCA Records. And I remember standing in the office with the publicist, and there was a new piano player coming from England. And she would say, well, it's just this is his first time in America. We don't know if he's, if anybody's going to be interested. Well, we can hire a photographer next time. And Billy said, no, you should hire Bob now. He's not too expensive. Get some pictures now. And that guy's name was Elton John. So I worked with Elton the first time he came to New York at the Fillmore when it was opening for Leon Russell. He liked my pictures and he liked me. And so he came back in the spring as a headliner at the Fillmore. A few months later, he was playing Carnegie Hall. I took pictures of him for the first 3 or 4 years that he worked in America.
Wow.
And anyway, as I say, each one just led to something else. Every time I went to the show, I meet more people. And
you took, it's like the Bible of rock and roll. When you think about all the legends, you captured all of them. You got Tina, but then you got over here, right here, this photograph, Chuck Berry. Look at this picture. One of my favorites.
That was actually when I took the pictures to the art director for the Tina Turner. About a year after I met them, I did a week in Ike Turner took me to California for a week to photograph Tina, and they used one of the pictures for an album cover. And I remember when I was talking to the art director, and he said, take the money for this album cover and get yourself a good camera. Because at that point, I was still using my dad's Minolta camera. I only had one lens on it. And he gave me not a lot of money, I think $300 or $400 for the album cover. But I went and bought a Nikon F camera, and I used Nikon for a couple of years. And actually later I switched to Olympus, and then in 1990 I switched to Canon cameras. But the first day I had the Nikon, I went to Madison Square Garden. They were having something called the Rock and Roll Revival. Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, I think Jerry Lee Lewis was on the bill, Little Richard. I remember backstage Bo Diddley saying, what do you mean Rock and Roll Revival? I never stopped working. They never went away or anything. But anyway, at the end of the show, Chuck Berry was kind of the headliner. He was up on stage rocking away, and people are going crazy. And I was trying to get up high above the audience to be able to see, get a clear shot of Chuck. And I was standing on a seat, and he just started licking his guitar, and I was trying to get above the hands in front of me. Everybody's waving their hands and stuff. And a guard started yelling at me to get off the seat. And I ignored him, and I kept trying to take pictures. He literally lifted me up, and I got that shot. I was just up above the heads, and Chuck Berry licked his guitar, and he looked like he was kissing it. Wow. And that's when I got that picture of him kissing his guitar. And then the usher dropped me in the aisle, and he said, if you take another picture, I'm going to smash your camera. And I took off like a cool breeze, But I got that shot. And
what a wonderful shot.
And a funny part about it is that I think it was Crawdaddy magazine or New York Rocker. One of those magazines used that picture as a cover, a picture on the cover of the magazine. And the writer was interviewing Chuck Berry for the cover story, and he showed him the picture they were going to use. And Chuck said he really liked the picture. Now, this weekend, it was on a weekend, I was away up in the country with my wife. I had a dream that Bob Dylan called me, and I wasn't home. And I come back on Monday, and the writer told me that he had been with Chuck Berry, interviewed me, he showed him my picture, and Chuck loved the picture, and he called me up because he wanted to get a copy of the picture. So I had a dream it was Bob Dylan, but it was actually Chuck Berry that called me up. I wasn't home. I didn't get the call, and he didn't leave a message or anything. But then I met him at Elephant's Memory was backing up Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley at a concert on the Lower East Side. And actually, it was a 4-day concert, and the first 3 days Chuck had spent the whole time in his car. He only came backstage to go straight on stage and then back into his car. He was very antisocial, didn't talk to anybody, just sat in his car by himself. He didn't really mix much. He didn't like drinking, and the Elephant's Memory did like drinking. We were drinking a lot. If you read his book, Chuck Berry didn't like drinking and gambling, and That's when he started spending all his time alone in the car. He wouldn't travel in a bus with the other bands because they were drinking and gambling and playing poker and stuff. And so he didn't mind being on his own by himself. So the fourth night, though, he came in and he was kind of hanging backstage. And I saw him there, and I actually had to run home, cross town, grab the picture, run back. Now we had some additives in those days that could help you drink more. You know, we call them dry goods. So that kind of helped me run out of the theater, run home, run back to the theater. And I went up to Chuck. He was still backstage. And I went over and I said, Mr. Berry, I took this picture. I wanted to show it to you. And he said, oh, I've seen that picture. I love that picture. Come here, come here. And he took me around to behind some amplifiers. And he took out his wallet, which was about this thick of $100 bills. I've never seen so many $100 bills. I've never seen any wallet that thick, actually, in the first place. And he took out a $100 bill. He said, can I buy this picture from you? And actually, I was going to give it to him. So I said, yeah, sure. It was the first $100 bill I ever got, I think. And then he handed it back. He said, I want you to autograph it for me. And it was the first time I ever signed one of my prints. Like nowadays, we sell them in the gallery. They're all signed and editioned and everything. But that was the first time anybody ever asked me to sign a print was Chuck Berry.
Chuck Berry, your
and I didn't
first
want to mess up the
transaction.
print. I didn't want to mess up the picture signing it on the front. So I turned it over and I wrote to the king of rock and roll, Chuck Berry, and I signed my name.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
To get somebody like him to want to sign it. What a compliment.
It was amazing. And over the next couple of years, I actually got to know him a little bit. One real thrill was actually about 2 or 3 years later, the Elephants' Memory. He was using the Elephants' Memory as a backup band, recording some songs here in New York. And the Elephants, called me up, come down, get a picture of us with Chuck Berry. But it was a rainy day, and those hairs, the guys used to straighten their hair on a rainy day. It wouldn't look so good.
I was there.
Curly. So I came in and Elephants asked if we could take a picture together. And Chuck said, no pictures today. And I knew it was because of his hair, But the Elephants were kind of, said, oh, but it's just for us. We'd love to have a picture together with you, Bob's a friend of ours. And Chuck said, Bob's a friend of mine, too, and he's not taking any pictures today.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, I'm a friend of Chuck Berry. That is cool.
It's pretty cool. Really cool.
Oh.
What about, and I'm going to ask you, because the world knows the iconic picture, and we'll talk about New York City, John Lennon, but John Lennon, Chuck Berry, that was one of his idols. He loved Chuck, and how about him meeting Chuck? What was that like?
If you tried to try and give rock and roll another name, you might call it Chuck Berry, right? In the 1950s, the whole generation worshipped his music, and when you see him perform today, past and present all come together, and the message is, hail, hail, rock and roll, right on.
Here he is, Chuck Berry!
Actually, I wasn't there. That happened about a week or so before I met John and Yoko. Uh-huh. They were promoting a new album that was coming out sometime in New York City album. And the Mike Douglas in Philadelphia had a daily TV show, and he used to often bring on co-hosts, different people to bring on their friends for the show. And for a week, he had John and Yoko as a co-host, and they brought on people like Jerry Rubin, and I think they had Timothy Leary. I know they had, who was the guy who ran for president? Ralph Nader.
To register the vote as well.
Register
because that's been a great change in the whole movement people are.
Yes, Ralph Nader.
Who ended up stealing 5% of the vote and ruining America's chance of having Al Gore instead of the first Bush president. But that guy, Ralph Nader, he's on that TV show. Actually, John says to him, would you ever go into politics? Because he was known as a safety campaigner. He had a big campaign about the Corvair car, which had a very dangerous gas tank or something. And John said, are you ever going to politics? And he said, no, we're not doing that. And then he went into politics and ruined the fucking election. But
that's funny.
A great show. Chuck Berry is on it. That's when John and Chuck Berry met. And John was very excited to meet Chuck Berry, his hero. What he didn't realize, because he and the Elephants' Memory were drinking a lot. I mean, these kind of people who wake up and have a drink so you don't have a hangover. And then you just spend the whole day and night drunk. And Chuck Berry didn't like drinking. He didn't like drunk people. And so John came over, hey, Chuck, it's great to see you. And Chuck was like, that's nice. There's actually a very funny bit. You can see that whole show on YouTube nowadays. The same show that Chuck Berry was on, John and Yoko were very into macrobiotic. I mean, especially Yoko had worked in a macrobiotic restaurant. Macrobiotic is a very bad name for a very good diet. it's like a really big name for a very simple diet.
It is
it's
a
really
big name.
just
I never
about balance
understood
and
it.
eating healthy foods. And so they had a macrobiotic chef on that show, and he gives them a cooking lesson. And it's John and Chuck and Yoko getting this cooking lesson. You can imagine Chuck Berry getting a macrobiotic cooking lesson. And John is carried away and drunk and having a really good time. And he can't believe he's with Chuck Berry, and they give him an apron. At one point, he tries to tie the apron around him and Chuck is not having it.
Yeah, mine. Okay, you have to have it.
We don't have much time. What are we doing tonight?
We're going to make something.
You have that half.
The what? The cheeky egg roll.
He doesn't like touching boys. He didn't like boys touching him. And he certainly didn't like a drunk touching him. And John's lucky he didn't get slugged because Chuck had a short temper.
Yeah.
You know, one time in the dressing room, actually, when Chuck Berry played at the Ritz, and among the people that came was Keith Richards had come. And Chuck don't care who's there or what's there. If he sees a cute young girl, that's all he wants, to pick up the girl and get the hell out. And he had met a nice girl, and he was on his way out of the dressing room when Keith came in, kind of behind him. There was an entrance from the stage, an entrance out to the audience, and Chuck was heading out to the front door. Keith came in the back, and he kind of grabbed his shoulder and said, "Hey, Keith." And Chuck he don't like being touched, like I said. He just turned around and punched whoever it was who was pulling his shoulder, and he just kept walking.
Wow.
And later he found out, and the funny part was that he was playing again, and Ron Wood was there. And somebody just told him that the guy from the Rolling Stones was here, so he apologized to Ron Wood for punching the Rolling Stone. Chuck was kind of old school guy, and actually I saw him play a lot of shows, and I learned something very interesting about his shows because he didn't like traveling with a band. He didn't want to have to pay a band and deal with all of the politics of having musicians on the road because his music is very simple. And by the time it got well known, he could just get a local band, could play a background of Chuck Berry music. And like it's in the film Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll, that Bruce Springsteen was once the local band that was backing up Chuck. And he said Chuck didn't show up until 5 minutes before the show, and it's time to go on. And the band is like, well, what songs are we going to say? They had no sound check or anything. And Chuck said, we're going to play some Chuck Berry songs. And the thing is, he gets on stage and he starts playing, and he wants the band to come along with him. And he might give them a couple of tips. Although at Madison Square Garden, I saw him walk over to the guitar player and just take the plug out and hand it to the guitar player and just keep. Chuck was playing and singing a song, and he just kind of turned around, took the plug out, handed it to the guy, and went back to the audience. Didn't even explain anything. The guy is standing there with the plug. Chuck Berry just kicked him off stage. But what he usually did was he would start out a tune, and as the band would pick it up, he'd kind of give them a high sign or tell them to pick it up a little. And sometimes it was after the first song if the band was really good and they got behind him, and they were, once it clicked, and he and the band were together. Sometimes the first song, sometimes the third song, sometimes the fifth song. But whenever the band would actually click, he would turn to the audience and he'd say, "Ladies and gentlemen, now we'd like to start our show."
It's so rock and roll.
And after I saw him do that 2 or 3 times, I realized that's the point when the band is with him and he's actually telling the audience, now we got it together. And the beginning is just kind of a sound check and a lesson, not just for the band, but for the audience to watch how to play rock and roll.
It's great.
And it's not about the notes. It's not about the tuning. He would bend notes and things. It's about the excitement. It's about the attitude. It's about playing the spirit of rock and roll.
If you enjoyed that episode of Bob Gruen and his stories, right place, right time, well, check out his story about his relationship with John Lennon right here. Click on the box and also give us a thumbs up and subscribe if it is your first time here and share it out. It's only rock and roll, kids, and we like it.